Okay. So talking about burnout and all of that, is that something that you see with teachers in your school?
I think so. So it kind of depends on the department. My school is very large. We have 2,300 students. And so we have a faculty of about 200.
Sheesh.
And so every department is pretty distinct. Like, we don't really interact with each other all that much. And every department chair has their own system for assigning people to classes. And so I've been in 2 departments in my school. And in the one I was previously in, the department chair would give the hardest classes to the newest teachers. And so new teachers would often have 3 or 4 preps, whereas veteran teachers would often have only 1 or 2.
Was that like a way of rewarding people who stayed?
Exactly. That was the purpose, was to reward people who've been there for a long time. And so when he would assign everybody to classes, like, he would take everybody's preferences into account, starting with the faculty member who'd been there the longest, which makes sense in terms of, like, keeping, teachers there. But the effect was that pretty much any new young teacher generally leaves the department within 3 to 4 years. I think right now, everybody that I entered with is gone.
And how long have you been there now? 4 years?
I've been there 4 years.
Okay.
And they're going for different reasons, but in my personal conversations with about half of them, it was generally they couldn't do it anymore. One girl moved to a private school nearby. Another girl moved to Chicago. She was pregnant. She was going to see her family, but she has not gone back to teaching because of some of her experience there. Another girl is the director of a museum now in D.C. for educational initiatives. And then another guy became a police officer. And I switched departments to teach journalism, which is obviously still a lot of work, but not near the same amount of work as having 4 preps that are 4 different academic preps.
Yeah. I'm a little nervous about that this year because I've got an extra prep than what I have had in previous years. So with a class I've never taught before, with 2 tiny kids at home. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah. And whenever you have a new prep, it's like being a first-year teacher again.
Yeah. I emailed someone in my department yesterday and just said, help. Like, what do I do? And he's like, are you coming to school on Friday? Because tomorrow obviously is not a work day for me. And he's like, are you coming to school tomorrow? He's like, because I can help. We can talk. I was like, okay, thank you. And like, we've both been there a dozen years. Like, this is my 13th year teaching or something crazy like that. So I don't know.
So I think you're right. The collaboration helps a lot. And within our department, there was a lot of a sense of like, oh, well, this person's taught this before and they can help you. But at the same time, you're still planning on a daily basis for like 4 different classes or 3 different classes. And what you notice over time is, oh, well, I'm not going to get to the point where this isn't going to be a thing for me because the older people have been there for so much longer and they're not retiring. So there's just kind of a sense of, well, there's nothing for me to do, so I might as well go do something else. So
you've been 4 years at WL and then had a couple years off before that, but then Kansas 1 year, is that right, or 2?
I was in Kansas for 3 years.
3 years, okay. So do you feel like some of the talk that I've heard about burnout is like that because we're being asked to do so much more than just like teach. It's not just about like planning lessons, but it's about like data input or like whatever, standardized test prep or all of these extra meetings and all of that. Do you feel like, does your school do a good job of managing that? Or do you feel like you guys have a ton of like extra stuff as well?
We actually don't really have extra stuff. We have a lot of, we have 200 teachers, but then we have about 100 other people, who are in the school, who manage a lot of those things for us. So like we have a full-time testing coordinator, and we have like 20 counselors. So we have 2 full-time social workers and 2 full-time.
You have like 20 counselors?
Yeah.
I'm jealous. We have 5 for 1,800 students.
That's pretty significant.
And by the way, that's probably why my journalism students are getting ready to cover a massive story about why our counselors leave, because it's like a sieve. They just like fall out of our building and go to nearby districts because it's too much work, because we don't have a testing coordinator either. Our counselors do that as well.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, crazy.
And we have like 3 other people who are in charge of academic programs at the school, like just like academic things. So like in an IB, AP coordination, that type of thing.
Okay.
And we have all kinds of people that take care of, all the coordination. Like I don't have any other duties really outside of my classes in journalism. We don't have to monitor the cafeteria or like buses or anything like that.
I want to move and be where you are.
For us, I think it's a lot more to do with our population and feeling like we don't get support for the unique needs in our classrooms that we feel like are unique that maybe aren't unique.
Okay. Like what?
A lot of part of it's discipline, in the sense that there's almost no backup for disciplinary problems. So, like, if let's say a kid does something and they get, like, a detention. If they don't show up to the detention, they might get Saturday school. If they don't go to Saturday school, they might get in-school suspension or something like that. But that's going to have to take a little while to kind of get to that point. But there's no consequences for kids not showing up for disciplinary problems. And nothing happens. So that's part of it is disciplinary stuff. It's almost not worth reporting disciplinary problems. But then also we have a lot of students that have significant issues with English. We have a huge population in our school of English language learners. And then our school is also a center for emotional and mental disabilities. And those kids are mainstreamed. And that's where most of my disciplinary problems over the years have come from, the kids from that center who are in my other classes, because they have such interesting and unique kind of challenges that, again, there's not really much support for how to deal with those students.
Gotcha. So one of the things that we've been talking about in this class is whether burnout is a right term, which I thought was kind of weird because one article that I read said something about how burnout means that you can't be like re-energized or something like that. Like you can't like reignite, whereas that's not necessarily what's happening with most teachers, which I thought was interesting. But the argument was that that what we are calling burnout is actually like the demoralization of teachers, that we just feel like demeaned and demoralized culturally by what's going on and like what's happening in policy and what's happening in like this education departments, like state and nationally. I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting take.
I agree with that. When I was at UVA, my like final thesis had to do with teacher leadership. And so essentially what I wrote was that I felt like if teachers were engaged more in decision-making in the local school district context, and then within the schools themselves, that they would feel like they had more of a part to play in what happened in their lives. Because there's a lot of control within the classroom. You basically have 100% of control what happens within your classroom, but you don't really have control over what happens in your professional life. And I think, especially when, like, I can't read articles online when you're teaching.
Hold on a second. My doorbell's ringing. I'm going to hit stop.
About working conditions for teachers, because people just default to, well, you get summers off, so, you get to leave work at 3:30, so, like, your life must be pretty good. And you can't have real conversations. And I think that's where the frustration happens most often, is that people, because of the perceived the life of a teacher is easier because of the break system, it's hard to have a conversation about what actually makes teachers, what leads to burnout, if you want to use the term burnout. And then if there's not really a way to enter into a real conversation.
I think that's totally true. I mean, I feel like even with Aaron, when we have conversations, he'll say like, well, at least you get summers off. And I'm like, I mean, do it really?
We were talking about how it's hard to even have a conversation about teaching conditions because people don't understand, like they can't engage in a conversation because of the perceived benefits of the teaching career.
Yeah, my husband's always like, well, you get 2 weeks over Christmas and you get this and you get that. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like, I mean, we take work home, we work longer days. They're, like, I don't even know. I just feel like it's hard to compare. And I also feel like, so you said earlier that you feel like you have like 100% control of what happens in your classroom.
Yeah.
And I know journalism's kind of unique because since no one else does what we do in the building, I think we do have more control. Do you feel like, do other teachers in your building have a ton of control or have like streamlined like collaboration or like curriculum mapping? Like, has that changed everything for you guys?
So in our district, our district generally only hires experienced teachers. So you have to have like 3 or 5 years experience to get even hired in our district for the most part. And I say that because once that happens, there's a lot of autonomy. Whereas in some districts in Virginia, and some that aren't that far away from here, will do kind of scripted, everybody has to be like on the same page at all times. Our building is not like that at all.
Okay.
We have the same curriculum guides, but the way that you get there is completely unique in every situation. We don't have to turn in lesson plans. I get observed when I'm in an observation year, like an evaluation year, I'll get observed maybe 3 times. Last year I didn't get observed once.
Okay.
So no one, in the sense that like no one knows or even sees my lesson plans or what happens in my classroom.
That's true. Yeah, I guess that's the same for us. Unless I'm getting observed, and even then, like, I know when that's happening, and I get to choose when he comes in and what I'm teaching that day. So
exactly. So there's like there's a curriculum that exists, but then the curriculum that is enacted, and I think this is the case even in a district where everything is scripted. You can be teaching the same basic lesson, but the way that the teacher approaches the lesson within the classroom is unique to another classroom. Mm-hmm. And the tone they take, the emphasis they put on different things, how much time they spend on a certain activity versus another activity, which like things they choose to have the discussion about. Those are all decisions made on a daily basis by individual teachers. And I think that teachers don't necessarily think about that as much because they feel like they have to meet all these requirements, and yes, they do. But at the same time, the teacher is still mediating everything that's given to them from the state or from their district. What comes out of their mouth, what they put in a PowerPoint, what they choose to do in terms of like the worksheets that they give and the tests that they make, that's entirely unique to what's happening in their room. So they have a lot more control even if they don't feel like they do.
Do you guys have tests that you take at the end? Like, do you either have like a graduation test or any sort of like statewide test that you take at the high school level? We do.
The Virginia Standards of Learning. The SOLs, it's a great acronym. So they've changed over the past couple of years, and they're still kind of in flux. They exist. They think the first SOLs were administered in like the year 2000, maybe, and they used to be at the end of every high school history class, and then in every high school science class, and then there were 2 English ones, one for reading, one for writing, you took as juniors. Now, the history ones no longer exist, or they do kind of exist. It's a little confusing. They're trying to make them performance assessments, but the tests still exist, and the performance assessments don't. So now they're only requiring you to take the end-of-course test for history if you need it to graduate. I think they have to pass 2 history ones to graduate and 2 science ones to graduate.
Okay. So that's
and there's math for every year.
So you have to take. You have to pass. Do you have to pass math every year to graduate then?
Yeah, you have to pass all the math. There's 3 math end of course tests.
Okay.
Algebra 1, geometry, and algebra 2.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, we've got something similar where we have like English 9, English 10, algebra 1, geometry, biology, physical science, and gov. No. biology, gov, and U.S. history, no physical science. And then you have to like essentially accumulate a certain number of points, kind of like they're scored like AP tests, like 1 through 5, and they have to accumulate a certain number of points by the time they graduate. So
now, is Ohio still part of the Common Core?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you guys leave it, or were you never part of it?
No, Kansas was when I was there, but Virginia was never part of Common Core.
Do you guys have standards that you feel like? Do you feel pressure to like hit standards, or do you feel like they more prioritize like, I don't know, learning?
Right. Again, it kind of depends on, I think, what you're teaching. There's pressure to get kids passing, in the sense that, you know, we're required to look at data once a year. So, like in the history department, we would look at you'd look at disaggregated data, so for different populations and things. And of course, you know, our kids that were English language learners and special ed struggled the most. Our Latino kids struggled, you know, more than our Asian kids, and that type of thing. It was kind of just by the book, like what you would expect. For English, I haven't had to sit in on a data meeting, but I also haven't taught a class that had a test associated with it. There's only one English class that does, and those are juniors, so I'm not teaching them. So I haven't had to do a data meeting. I think I would assume that in science and math, the pressures are more significant, especially in math. I know that our math teachers like talk a lot about trying to be on the same page, and there's a lot of extra math opportunities to give people support.
Okay. So switching gears back to like initial questions, are there things that have you ever gotten to the point where you're feeling very like either, I don't really want to say demoralized or burned out, because I think they're both pretty extreme terms, but like, do you ever get to the point where you're like overwhelmed? And
I think so. I mean, when I left Kansas, I didn't think that I'd go back to teaching.
Yeah, I remember that.
And part of what happened for me when I was in grad school was looking at research and reading research and discovering that my feelings were universal and not unique. And that actually made me feel more like I wanted to teach, which is a little counterintuitive.
Yeah, like there's no chance of you getting better because everybody feels like this.
Right.
But therefore, maybe you should do it anyway because you're not alone.
Exactly. I think that's kind of how it worked for me. But I think part of it was also just recognizing, excuse me, that a teacher that can form relationships with kids really makes a difference. And that's something that I've always, just on my evaluation, something that they've always noted for me. And I was like, well, you know, if that's really the only factor that is a strong predictor of student success, then yeah, I guess that's the right position for me to be in. I question, and I'd be curious to hear about your experience with this. I question if my ability to be an effective teacher as like somebody who's married and has played with kids, because I feel like as a single person, I don't have time to do my job the way that I want to. And I can't imagine what it would be like if I had other pressures.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that I've just had to adjust. Like I like to say, if you would have asked me 12 years ago when I first started teaching, I would have said, I'm going to be the best teacher that I can be. I would have said, I'm going to be the best teacher, like, on the planet, you know? Like, I would have just said, like, because that's how I am. Like, I'm super competitive. Like, if it can be done, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it the best that anybody's ever seen. And I think I realized really quickly that, like, that's not what I want for my life. Like, you know, like, I'm never going to be the first teacher in my building, and I'm never going to be the last teacher there. And do I really want that? And so then I kind of had to shift my goals to like, I'm going to be the best teacher I can be between the hours of 6:45 and 3:30. And, you know, and like over the past couple of years, especially since Finn was born, like I've just kind of said, okay, what makes sense for a realistic goal for like what I want my job and like my work home life balance to be. And I found that kids tend to understand that, like when students are like, hey, do you have our essays graded? And I'm like, nope, because I have a life. And then they laugh and stuff, but like they get it. And I feel like I've been able to embrace a little bit more of that like humanity side of things. Like I'm not this superwoman. Like, there might be a time when there's this mistake on something or like or I'll say to kids like, hey, my goal is to get these papers graded to give back to you tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and I'm like, well, I had a 1-year-old throwing up. So sorry, didn't get done. And that like, that's just reality. And I think they actually appreciate it a little bit. I mean, they still want their papers graded, but I don't know. There have been times when, not many, probably only 2 or 3 over the past 2 years, when I've been like, I didn't get any sleep last night because I had a kid who was up all night with a fever, or I have a newborn who decided he didn't want to sleep. And so, we're going to have a work day instead of me actively teaching. And I'm almost like ashamed to say that out loud because I feel like 5 years ago I would have been horrified by that idea. But it's happened like twice in 2 years. It's not like I'm giving kids every 3 days, 3 days out of every week to do nothing in my class. And I've just had to kind of embrace that that's my reality right now with small kids, and that's okay. But yeah, I don't know. It is interesting. Like that's why I stopped doing the curriculum stuff, and that's why I've taken a back seat from some other things because my priorities are different. I don't know.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, I know if I had kids, I wouldn't be doing the triathlon stuff. And that's, 10 to 15 hours of my week just in training plus the showers.
Plus showering, yes. Please shower.
Plus showering. So, it ends up probably taking up 15 to 20 hours of my week.
Yeah.
And that's a part-time job.
Yeah. I will say, I try really hard to keep boundaries. Unless I collected papers a week ago and I'm nowhere near getting them back, actual essays, I don't bring things home. I really try, and I make a lot of my other assessments that are not papers easily gradable by students so that I don't have to so that they can do that sort of thing with me instead of me. And I work really, really hard during the time that I'm at school. I don't do a ton of socializing. I mean, I hang out during lunch, but with teachers. But a lot of other times, I'm hard at work because I know that that's my work time. Because once I go home, it's dinner and bedtime, and then it's 9:00 at night. And holy crap, where did the evening go? I have to wake up at 5:15 in the morning.
Yep, that makes sense.